What makes listening difficult? This inconvenience causes the student to block himself and cannot learn to understand not only listen but also understanding the message that is being given. Number one, when we write in English, it is right to recite the words in all means assisting the process of seeing when we listen. It is necessary to categorize with short words so that the student can write when listening to that information and to be able to write it. Number two, redundancy. Very important. Also, when it is written, we can fall into the bias or repeating what is being said in the audio. It must be repeated so that it's clear and that the student can understand. For example, in conversations that are commonly read in books, academically, English is repeated over and over different ways, and so that the context of the conversation understood. Another very common example is when something very illogical is said. This is very difficult for the student. We are listening because it is not something that can be understood. 4. It is very common that when the listening to an audio, colloquial language is used that is to say every day because this language is used more among people with confidence or family, friends, boyfriends. For example, it's raining cats and dogs. No. Correct is it's raining very hard. It's been looking good. Correct is it's delicious. Pressure stress makes a difference to how it sounds. For example, the president wants to remove the embargo. The accent stays on the second syllable, making it sound longer. Intonation is also a problem because it cannot often perceive.
Next, I will mention the micro skills with Jack Richards provided in his article on teaching listening skills. Number 1. Retain chunks of language of different lengths in short-term memory. Number 2. Discriminate among the distinctive sounds of English. Number 3. Recognize English stress patterns, words in stressed and understated positions, rhythmic structure, institutional contours, and their role in signaling information. Number 4. Recognize reduced forms of words. Number 5. Distinguish word boundaries, recognize a core of words and interpret word others' patterns and their significance. Number 6. Process speech and different rates of delivery. Number 5. Process speech containing pauses, errors, corrections, and other performance variables. Number 8. Recognize grammatical words classes, nouns, verb, etc. Systems, patterns, rules, and elliptical forms. Number 9. Detect sentence continuance and distinguish between major and minor constituents. Number 10. Recognize that a particular meaning may be expressed in different grammatical forms. Number 11. Recognize cohesive decisive in spoken discourse. Number 12. Recognize the communicative functions of utterances according to situations, participants, goals. Number 13. Infer situations, participants, goals using real world knowledge. Number 14. From events, ideas, describe, predict outcomes, infer links and connections between events, deduce causes and effects, and detect such relations as main idea. Supporting idea, new information, given information, generation, and exemplification. Number 15. Distinguish between literal and implied meanings. Number 16. Use facial, kinesthetic, body language, and other nonverbal clues to decipher meanings. Number 17. Develop and use a battery of listening strategies such as detecting keywords, guessing the meaning of words from context, apple of for help, and signaling comprehension or lack thereof. And finally, I will share some exercise to distinguish the difference between top-down and bottom-up. The first example is a listening, in which an audio must be listened to be able to answer the blank spaces. In this exercise, we can observe both the top-down and bottom-up signs. On the one hand, the top-down can be seen when predicting the words that will go in the blanks for the topic being spoken, and the bottom-up for attention that is getting to the sound of the word that should go in the blank. In the second example, you have to listen to an audio and then answer the questions with a yes or no, depending on the topic that was discussed in the audio. Therefore, it is top-down. And the last exercise is from the bottom up, since you have to listen to an audio and determine which is the correct name that is being heard.
Are considered possible techniques available to teach listening skill, as well as various types of listening performed. That is, what your student doing a listening technique. Sometimes these types of perform are embedded in a large technique or task, and something they are themselves the full sound of technical activity. Type of listening performs are six. The first is reactive. This is learning simply listen to the surface structure of an order for the purpose of repeating it back to you. It requires little meaningful processing, and it involves a minor aspect of an directive communicative purpose, and the role of listening is merely a tape record. And the second is intensive and focus on components, phonemes, words, intonation, discourse, Americans, and it requires bottom-up skill, processing for sound the words, the grammatic relationship to the lexical meaning, to a final message. And example is student listen for ghosts in grow in drills. And DJ repeats a word, sentence several times to imprint in the student mind. And student listen and noting specific elements such as intonation, strength, contraction, and grammatical structure. That's for assessing intensive listening. And distinguish phonemic pairs and glass, leaf,
or leaf, distinguish morpholic pairs, miss or miss is missed, and distinguish stress partner, I can go and I can go. A phrase recognition, I come from Taiwan and I am Taiwanese. Repetition, student repeats a word. Other is responsive. A student task is to process the teacher's thought, audio immediately, and to fashion appropriate reply. Ask for a same response listening. Asking question, how are you today? What did you use last night? And giving comments, take a sheet of paper and pencil. Seeking clarification, what was the word you say? And seeking comparison, how many people were in the elevator when the power went out? And selective, this is students can do material selectivity, usually in lower strata of the score for certain information. A student needs to be able to find important information in a field of potential distracting information. Type of material use. Speech, medium broadcast, story and anecdote, and long conversation. You can ask students to listen for people names, dates, certain facts or events, location, situation, context, etc. Main ideas or conclusion. As for ascending selective listening, listening close, fill in the blanks. Verbal information transfer, give multiple choice verbal response. Picture creates information transfer, choose a picture. Chart completions, fill in grid. And simple repetition is repeating similar sentence. Extensive, it aims to develop a top-down concept activation schema with global understanding. Type of material used: speech, media broadcast, story and anecdotes, long conversation. It may require the student to invoke other interactive skills. And the last is interactive. It can include a five types as the learning, participate in discussion, debates, conversation, role plays, and other part of group work. And it must be interactive with the speaking and perfect the other, a skill in the authentic give and take of communication interchange.
Principles for designing listening techniques. Number 1. In an interactive for skills curriculum, make sure that you don't overlook the importance of techniques that specifically develop listening comprehension competence. If your curriculum is strongly content-based or otherwise dedicated to the integration of skills, remember that each of the separate skills deserves special focus in appropriate dose. Number 2. Use techniques that are intrinsically motivating. Appeal to listeners' personal interests and goals. Science background information is an important factor in listening. Take into full account the experience, goals, and abilities of your students as you design lessons. Also remember that the cultural background of your students can be both facilitating and interfering in the process of listening. Number 3. Utilize authentic language and context. Authentic language and real-world tasks enables students to see the relevance of classroom activity to their long-term communication goals. If you introduce natural text rather than concocted artificial material, students will more readily dive into the activity. And number 4, carefully consider the form of listener responses. Comprehension itself is not extremely observable. We cannot peer into a learner's brain through a little window of empirically observed that is stored there after someone else has said something, we can only infer that certain things have been comprehended through students over responses to speech. It is therefore important for teachers to design teaching in such a way that the student responses indicate whether or not their comprehension has been correct. Lud offered 9 different ways that we can check a listener's comprehension. Number 1. Doing. The listener responds physically to command. Choosing. The listener selects from alternatives such as picture objects and text. Transferring. The listener draws a picture of what is heard. Answering. The listener asks a question about the message. Conditioning. The listener outlines or takes notes on a lecture. Extending. The listener provides an ending to a story heard. Duplicating. The listener translates message into the native language or repeats in verbatim. Modeling. The listener orders a meal, for example, after listening to a model order. And conversating. The listener engages in a conversation that indicates appropriate processing information. Examples for these 4 points. Number 1. An activity in which there is audio or some other activity that puts the student's ear into practice will not help them to develop that skill. Number 2. It is not the same to give a class where we want to develop simple listening skills without imagining audios or dynamics than to give a class where the teacher shows interest in order to capture the student attention. Number 3. An example here could be that the students create a short text so that later the other students read each randomly. And number 4. Not all students learn in the same way. As teachers, we have to adapt activities for them, because if a student does not understand with a text, he may be able to understand with an audio or a game. These 4 points tell us about the importance we place on skills over students. I think we should focus on paying more attention if the skills work and when to able them, and give the student the opportunity to make mistakes but learn for those mistakes and once as a teacher to observe in what they failed. Making the activities we give to the listeners attractive and motivating is important for the students to pay attention, since listening is difficult to understand what they hear. It is important to carry out activity tests or other techniques to know if the students pays attention to what was said to them or don't know if they understood. Since in listening it is not easy to identify errors. The situation for this is in a classroom. Students learn better by listening to audios and answering questions, and between them they can support each other between 2 people. It can be audio or video where several people appear starting a conversation using a specific topic, so that the students can identify the context of the story at the end of the video. The test will be carried out to determine if they understood. When I was in English courses at the university where I studied, this type of activities helped us a lot of since in the end we answered correctly the activity that we were assigned.